This is 911. State your emergency. Hello? I can't help you if I don't know where you're at, honey. Where are you at? Where are you? I need as many units as I can get for Fairfield Road. Give me the numbers.
911, what's your emergency?
Hey friends, it's Fletch. I'm Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. Welcome to this new podcast series, Off the Cuff, Confessions of an ENP. Brought to you by 911 Inform, delivering next-generation 911 services for the enterprise today and making every second count. In this series, we're going to be talking to ENPs that have been on the job for years, as well as those brand new ENPs that have just passed the test. We'll dig in and have an in-depth conversation and find out what the ENP certification means to them. We'll talk about why they did it, what it means for their career, and what they did to pass the exam. Industry certifications are important to industry professionals, and the ENP certification is one that's admired by many in public safety. So join me as we find out exactly what makes an ENP tick in this off-the-cuff podcast series, Confessions of an ENP. Hey, it's Fletch. Welcome to this episode of True Confessions of an ENP, Off the Cuff. Today we are sitting down and talking to Josh Michaelis, who's with the Rice County Emergency Communications Center out in Rice County, Lyons, Kansas. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we're not in Kansas anymore. Where does that come from?
Now, that comes from some movie, I guess.
So click your heels and tell me about Rice County, Kansas. What's up? What's going on out there?
Well, we are predominantly pretty much a rural Kansas community. Agricultural is our leading industry. Probably then second to that is going to actually be mining with some salt mines, and then also natural gas in the area as well are going to be our three primary occupations in the area. We are a county of just under 10,000 population-wise.
My goodness.
So pretty small, 773 square miles roughly of response area. But that's kind of a high-level overview of Rice County.
So do you have local PD, or do you have just sheriffs running around?
No. So actually, we're fortunate enough to have a countywide sheriff's office, two local police departments. Those communities are both roughly in about the 3,000 population category, and those are full-time agencies. And then we have some part-time agencies in some of our smaller communities.
So with a county that size, pretty much everybody knows everybody, huh?
At times, yes. We pretty much know everybody.
That can be good and it can be bad.
That is very true.
So how long have you been over there at Rice County?
So I've been with Rice County since 1997. Started as a public safety telecommunicator when it was underneath the sheriff's office. Then I think in roughly about 2000, I was promoted to the supervisor underneath the sheriff's office, and then actually we became our own standalone entity of county government in 2006. But I've been either the supervisor or director for roughly 22 years.
Okay, well that's quite some time, man. What makes you hang around that long?
I think for me, a lot of it was just the changing of technology. With it, I reflect back and really, even for Rice County, we only started 911 was implemented back in 1992. And then we kind of phased it in by communities. It wasn't county-wide. And like I said, I came on in 97. But that's pretty young. That's only 5 years that 911 had even been in existence in the county, for addressing and having that single 3-digit number to report emergencies. And I'm sure you're well aware of this, but even if that was in 97, I think by 98, 99, we were starting to deal with these things called cell phones and how were those calls going to be routed and all of that. And I'm like, That's kind of new and different with it. And here we are now into kind of this next generation type of era of 911 service.
So it seems like you're going to have probably a lot of wide open outdoor space out in your area. I'm just guessing, but how's cell phone accuracy on location?
Today I'd say it's a lot better than it was before. When we first started, we were just answering those 911 calls on our administrative lines. We weren't routing those till we requested, phase one and phase two information. Um, with that, it's been, I would say, fairly decent for us because a lot of it tended to be hybrid based anyway, location, because we may not always have three towers to do some triangulation to get that
Sure.
accurate location.
You might just have one.
Yeah, so it's good, but it's gotten better over time. Whether that's through different technologies, different vendors that are on the market. Here in Kansas, we are part of a hosted NG 911 solution. And we have a great GIS team who's done excellent work when it comes to that. So our accuracies that we're now kind of getting through Rapid Deploy's Radius Plus product is pretty spot on. Between that and signals from them, accuracy is pretty good. So
No, that's great. So it's interesting how a small agency or a smaller agency like yourself can really take advantage of some of the new technology that's out there because the lift is not as hard as a large major metropolitan area that's got to do a whole lot of back end work. So, you almost get the benefit on the forefront of it.
yeah, we do, and I would really have to say a lot of that, comes back to at least in Kansas, our GIS department. When we talked about next generation 911, the first thing that they did was to make sure that GIS data was accurate, and that it was seamless. So in other words, center lines matched up, between counties, our counties to our west, our counties to the east, and there was none of that gray area to where the call, should actually go or where it's plotting at. Um, that heavy lift was the first thing that the state of Kansas did, and I think that's what's kind of made the accuracy a little bit has made it better for us as a state. And then, of course, locally is just having that data that's accurate and validated every quarter. I mean, that's one thing that probably a lot of people don't know about Kansas is anytime that there's a GIS update, it's validated before it's pushed up, and we're looking at over 99% accuracy in our GIS data statewide.
Wow.
And
Wow.
100% participation from the counties to make sure that data is accurate.
So let me ask you, what made you wait so long to get your ENP in your career?
It was something that I identified early on. And I can't really answer why I did or didn't, try and to get my EMP certification before then. But I think even now, as I set up here and we have this discussion today, Mark, I bought that study guide 3 times. And I think without pulling out and look at it, what is the latest version? Is that 6.1 or
Yeah, I
something?
believe 6.1 is the latest, and there's a new one probably on its way.
See, and I think I had like 5.9 or version 5, then 6.0, and then 6.1. And I finally just said, and I probably purchased those all within 18 months. I mean, that's how also quick the course is changing, technology is changing to do that. And I just finally had to say, we're going to do this. And so that's just kind of where it happened. I said, I can't say, or I can't procrastinate because maybe staffing is short. I just got to do this and still get it accomplished regardless of what the current dynamics are within the center, whether that's staff shortages, COVID, all of those situations that played into that. So
How did COVID affect your area out in the middle of the country? Because you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Was the impact the same, do you think, around the country in rural areas as the metros?
for For me at the center, I do think so. I mean, we kind of had some contingency plans, whether that be team members that are positive or they have family members that are positive. Any of that type of information played to that. And we actually had to go into a minimal staffing coverage that basically, we were down to 50% of the entire staff, which is not a lot. So we had 4 available people,
Wow.
basically. And we went to 12-hour shifts and you worked every other day. And we did that till people were back from either being quarantined or that they were no longer infectious and could come back to work if they were COVID positive. So we had a stretch there where it was pretty tight. I mean, it was like I said, we were all working the console ourselves and working those every other day, 12-hour shifts to get the center covered. So
Well, you got to do what you got to do to cope with it, right? I mean, I think there was an impact all over. So in a lot of ways, you may have had a little bit of a reprieve, but then in other ways, I think you had it harder because you didn't have a large staff to work with. When you're down 50%, that leaves you with 4 people. There's only so much you can do.
yeah, and luckily that only happened to us once. You know, outside of that, every once in a while somebody may be off for quarantine. And I guess what was amazing about COVID is, um, you know, operations were a little bit different before there was a vaccine available, and then it also kind of changed the dynamic a little bit after there was the availability to get vaccinated if somebody chose to do that with that. And the reason I just think about that is before I have healthcare workers in my house, and 2 of them, and you know, one of them was positive from the healthcare facility. Well, that just mean that stuck me in quarantine for almost 60 days,
Wow.
because of just that whole dynamics of how long it was there and the last contact day and with that. So luckily for me, it was myself, and I could do a lot of stuff remotely, from my kitchen table that didn't require me to answer a phone or anything of that nature. But
How about remote call takers? Did you look at any technology that could extend your center out with a Go kit or something?
we did not a whole lot for us here because of that, but I know it was explored it by others in the state of Kansas and still being looked at. Um, with that, a lot of it is just every center in every state kind of does things a little bit differently, and how can that be incorporated um, into working remotely. The radio would definitely be easy to accomplish
Hmm.
with that. Administrative phone calls could be easily accomplished. The biggest, I think, hurdle that we would have to overcome is actually processing of a 911 phone call and getting that valuable anti-alley information, any type of other supplemental data that may come through a call, and how do we get that, to somebody at a remote location like their house as compared to a backup center or a secondary center.
Sure. And then you got the problem of keeping it secure, right? Once you get that data there, you gotta be sensitive to that. And there are ways around that. And I think a lot of agencies explored that. And by putting together, a Go kit in a box, you had everything there. It was all kind of just plug and play wherever you could find connectivity. But that took a little bit of work to vet all that and make sure it was ready to actually deploy.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that kept maybe any agencies from Kansas from possibly doing that. Because we currently have 107 PSAPs in the state that are on the same hosted solution. So if you go remote with one, that's 106 PSAPs in that network, where network security even becomes a greater issue, than if we were just all individual standalone PSAPs with their own back center, backroom equipment. You can secure that a lot easier than you could probably secure 106 PSAPs on a hosted system.
Sure, and you've just opened up your attack plane too, right?
Yes.
So you got one little guy out here who would be nothing on their own, but now they've got the whole state infected because they weren't careful with some connectivity, or you let a virus get in, or potentially, or a hacker get in or whatever, you could really do some damage out there.
Yeah, and so I think that's probably the biggest hurdle for us in the state of Kansas, and that are on that solution, and that 107 is almost the entire state of Kansas, minus the Mid-American Regional Council area, which is that Kansas City, which they work collectively between the Kansas and the Missouri side.
Hmm.
We have 5 counties in Kansas that are part of MARC, and I think it's about 4 or 5 that are over in Missouri as well, that are part of that solution. And so those are about the only ones that are outside, the Kansas hosted solution footprint.
Right. So what are you doing with staffing as far as training? Do you have any other ENPs in your agency?
We do not have any other EMPs in our agency. I guess we should have covered this earlier. Myself included, entire staff is 8 individuals. So have a shift supervisor, and then we have 6 team members. They could either be a public safety telecommunicator 1 or 2. With that, so we're relatively small with it, but at this point, no other ENPs for us.
So are you putting together a program, or would you want to see a program that kind of extended those out into the TCs?
Um, Definitely not opposed to that. I do have one individual right now that's working on their RPL,
Okay.
um, as well, just to do their registered public safety leaders is a good step as well, with it. And talk about training for us currently, we have about a 12-week program, and we are actually currently kind of revamping our whole program and looking at it again, and just to make sure that we have any standard met out there, whether that's from NINA, APCO, um, make sure nothing's in conflict maybe with an NFPA requirement, things of that nature as well. But unfortunately, as a state, we at this point don't have any type of mandatory training, just some recommended training standards. So,
Gotcha. So, when you I grew up in a really rural area. My town was uh, probably a little smaller than your county, but population wise and department size was probably about the same. Looking back on that as compared to things today, that was a really nice, easygoing lifestyle back then. Although sometimes it got a little hectic, but it was kind of nice. Everybody knew everybody. Mrs. Smith out on Davis Road, and all the intersections had these odd localized names that were nowhere near official, but you knew exactly, where the old 7-Eleven was, and, the old Thatcher barn or whatever. Um, Growing up in that kind of area is really nice. Um, how do you think that fits into today's modern policing, if you will, where things just get a little more computerized? Do the two fit together?
I really think they do, and I think a lot of that also comes down to leadership within each organization, and their view on technology and the benefits of it. Um, but it has definitely enhanced us. We just think about some of those tools that are out there, um, and I think about use case scenarios of before we'd ever heard of anything like, let's say, what 3 words.
Hmm.
We may take a cell phone call of some hunter here in deer season fell out of their tree stand. They really don't know where they're at, and the closest crossroads still may be a quarter mile or half mile from where they're located.
Sure.
Um, so just technology like that not only improves us, deploying resources to them, but it also enhances that response from EMS, fire, law enforcement, whoever's needed. Um, and so I think those technology advances help any community where they're at, regardless of size.
Well, I think, like what 3 words is a great example. So that's something that was designed to address the unaddressable, right? To use a quote from some other people. And again, falling out of a tree stand. Um, I might be able to give you a compass direction to the local liquor store and distance. And maybe I had too much of that. That's why I fell out of the tree stand. But
Yeah,
it doesn't have an address, right? It's almost an impossible task to
yeah.
dispatch somebody, even if you had a latitude, longitude. How do I get there? What's in between me and that point? It's a difficult conundrum to have to deal with. So,
Yeah.
how are your staffing levels in the area? When you get this kind of rural area, everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows what they're going to do when they grow up. You've got your people that are going to be, well, I'm going to go do this, and then you've got people that are going to go do something else. Do you find that you still have? How are your staffing shortages?
I think they're still ever present. I think maybe even a little bit more highlighted, since post COVID. Not that we're technically probably post COVID with that, but it's really ebb and flows. We've had our times where we've been fully staffed and fully trained. I even like to at times now say I'm fully staffed but not fully trained because I may have one or two in training. But if I look at all of our surrounding PSAPs around us here in Rice County, um, there's easily at some point, maybe 2 points during the year, where staff shortages are down, to where I may even hear my neighboring peers working the console that day.
Right.
Just like they may hear me working the console myself, whether that be just even full staff, life still goes on. People get sick. Maybe their kids get sick. And so we got to come in and still cover the console with it. But I would say overall, when you have small centers, um, you know, two people is you're down 25%.
Sure.
And that's huge with it. So, um, but yeah, it's ever present, ever ebb and flowing, in my opinion. Of getting new individuals hired, trained, and on their own, and then how frequently is that process being repeated? Um,
When those days roll around that you got to go work the desk, do you look forward to those days?
um, I do, and I will be completely honest. I probably get better as the day progresses because I start to re-hone in on some of those skills. Um, but
You,
sometimes
you
when I
feel
sit
the
down,
rust in the morning, though, right?
I I do. I sit down in the morning or evening whenever they have me come in the first shift, and I said, "Well, it looks like the JV squad is working today because you know I'm not as good as those varsity players that are doing this every day, taking care of our citizens and responders."
In an area that's small, one thing that I ran into when I worked the desk back 1980 to 85, and every call that came in, just about, I knew the person. How does that change? I'm sure you guys experience that with a center in an area that contained out there. You pretty much know everybody.
There is that occurs from there. That you may not know them directly, but you may know them indirectly
Right.
as well. And I think that kind of also makes a difference, um, you know, of that call when it comes in is how close is that relationship to that individual um, with it as well. And I would say I think for us, fortunately, um, those relationships that maybe team members have had with citizens where they're very close, I think to this point we've been very fortunate, and those haven't intermixed um, very frequently. Matter of fact, infrequently, has somebody actually had to handle a phone call for maybe a family member, whether that's immediate or not immediate family members with it, but it does happen, or them with it. So
Right. Well, I started out in public safety, even in high school when I was 16 as a cadet on the local ambulance squad. And, one of the first bad tragedies was a suicide. of a classmate of mine with a 44 Magnum, and that was just wow. That was a lot to see and a lot to process for somebody that young, and that always stayed with me throughout the years. But um, it was just constant. I mean, I remember, friends, close friends that, we pulled out of car wrecks and pulled out of a car in the woods or, whatever. And it was difficult because just about every call you knew of that person, if not knowing them direct. And I think that takes its toll on the call taker.
It really does, and I think that has to, for a smaller agency, that kind of has to be a heightened awareness. When it comes to peer support and knowing when that happens, is that the likelihood that you're going to take and process a call, whether it's a medical or maybe a structure fire that's affected their house or something of that nature, is that those chances go up in smaller communities where your team members make up the base that are going to answer those calls from those individuals during their time of need. So I just think we have to be a little bit more aware of it, and when we know that that happens, to come in and give them some relief, get away from the desk or the console, and let them kind of process what has happened and move on from there. So.
Yeah, because 40 years ago, I know I don't look that old, but 40 years ago, the response to that was 4 words: "Suck it up, Buttercup." I mean, that was it, right?
Yeah.
You're here to do the job, and that's what the job is. There was nothing like peer support or anything even close to that. Especially for people in the industry, maybe for students at a school or something where a tragedy took place, but even then, that kind of stuff just didn't happen back then. Certainly not like it does today. Um, so, what prompted you to go get your ENP? What was the final straw that said, "Hey, Josh, time to get off your ass"?
Well, I think probably a couple of things. One is I had identified it, maybe I wouldn't say midway through my career. I can't give you an exact year of when I looked at it and said, hey, um, that has some significance to it. I think probably for me, and finally just biting the bullet and saying, okay, I need to get in a couple of study groups. I need to do this and get ready to take the exam, and I'm not going to back out. I'm going to here's here's the dollars that have been earmarked for it and paid. So that kind of held me to the fire. But for me, a lot of it was just how my role has progressed. Even though that I'm the director of Rice County Emergency Communications, I've been appointed by the last two governors of Kansas to sit on the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council, and I serve as the operations chair.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and so Kansas, you know, I think they've done quite well and have been one of the nation's leaders in implementation and deployment of NG 911 services, from an EZNet, to um, just the Internet of Things and processing those calls, and hopefully for the one day to have all those technologies. And I felt like getting my EMP, um, although I'll say this, I don't understand it 100%, but now I have a better understanding of some of that networking technology, how that processes work, you know. So how does that session internet protocol, how does it make its way through the system, and what are all the pieces that it has to touch to be validated, Um, so to me, getting that EMP has also provided me a greater understanding of where the state of Kansas is at, and also in that role that I serve as the operations chair for the coordinating council, and being able to convey that message to other users on the hosted solution.
Hmm.
So, like I said, not 100% understanding, um, but a lot more understanding um, to what's actually taken place thanks to the ENP process, to have a better understanding of NG 911 and where it's at and where it's going.
What was the number one thing that made you go, holy crap, I didn't know that that worked like that? What did you learn?
Boy, do I have to pick out just one thing?
Or several?
Um, and like I said, for me, it's going to focus on a lot of that technology. Um, just the connection maybe between um, legacy selective routers, and selective routers for NG911. The border control stations, how it comes in, and then gets split off into different ways. Just that whole schematic of that call process. And just to maybe, like I said, have a better understanding of that visual process and to say, okay, when this is happening, this is what's going on with it. And probably then the other thing for me was takeaway is when it comes to some MLTS type of things and having that PS alley and how that's developed and the maintenance of it for that company or the provider of it, of how that information is getting in there so that we can have um, the accuracy that addresses both things, as both Kerry's Law and Ray Baum's Act. I mean,
Oh yeah, two items very close to me.
so it is, but I mean, learning about that PS Alley has given me the skill set and the knowledge to work directly, maybe like for us with we have a small Christian college in our county as well, and just to get them reconfigured to where, you know, they weren't having to dial a 9 to get out, but we didn't have a dispatchable location for every campus building. They used to all show the billing address of where the
Right.
bill went. And now we've got every building on that campus assigned, and then it's put into their PS alley. So that way, when they call, we're getting a more accurate location of where on campus the incident is occurring.
It really touches my heart to hear that from you because that was something that for a decade and a half prior to Kerry's Law, I had just been trying to beat into different people saying, this is important. This is a problem. Everybody I talk to does not have an answer for this, or it's not implemented properly in their county, in their businesses. This is a huge issue. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's a small fraction of the phone calls. And now that I was able to get Kerry's Law through and raise the awareness on this. Now the stories are coming in. Oh yeah, that is a problem. Oh yeah, we did have this issue. Oh yeah, that has taken care of that, or this is still broken. So it's great to see that something was able to be learned by the industry as a whole that some people saw as a problem. It's just unfortunate that there were several deaths that had to bring that to our attention. But it's such a complex machine, right? And such a Rube Goldberg machine. When you think about it, you're almost amazed that it even works at all. And it has for so long. Um, I think next gen, as complex as it is, it actually makes things a little bit simpler when you think about it.
Yeah, what I think all those services, um, like Ray Bombs, and we talk about that is what we've also found. You talk about staffing is now we may find our staff members coming in from a location that doesn't have that historic knowledge of being from a small center in a small county, and you know, um, where Ray's hay shed is at, um, so
Or used to be.
there makes it easier to keep in people. So
Oh, that's where Ray's barn used to be 10 years ago.
yeah, exactly. And I think you touched on one thing. You mentioned both Kerry's Law and Ray Baum's Act, and sometimes, um, obviously, those they're have all come out because of a tragedy. And the one thing that I've always liked to say to legislators, whether they're local or national, when I meet with them, I said I'd really like for us to become proactive and stop naming legislation out of victims. You
Yeah.
know, let's get proactive and let's do this before we attach somebody's name to it.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
It is.
But yeah, no, I was just driving through, my old hometown where I grew up and where I dispatched, and there was a big gully in the highway at one point where the railroad crossing went through. And of course, that railroad crossing was just a magnet for motor vehicle accidents. And it was called Station Hill. And now, because of the topology change, it's not a hill anymore. They filled it in, the tracks are gone. And Station Hill might still be there, but it's a flat piece of road now. So it's how many people in an area would still know Station Hill or the history behind it? Um, but I can tell you there's probably 30 or 40 places in town that have the local colloquial nicknames that
Yes.
probably most don't have a meaning anymore. But
Yeah.
that's the way it always was.
That is very true.
So whether it was a business name or, there's another place out on not by the highway. It was by a cornfield called Zynga's Corn Patch. It's a Dairy Queen now. It's still called Zynga's, by everybody in the area, So, these things, people don't think about these things when you've got to send emergency services somewhere and you've got to communicate this information. It's almost like you're speaking a separate language all of a sudden.
Yeah, it is, and like I said, that's a huge part of training is because, like I said, if you have those new team members come in, and not only just for us within the communication center, even our responders, you know, because of maybe the population base you have and what your applicant pool look like is sometimes, what we see even in our EMS service is we may have EMS personnel coming in and working their shift here, taking a day off, then their next shift they work in a completely different county. And they
Sure.
may not even be from our county. So we talk about those names and how do we train on that? I think the technology that we have available, you know, whether that's alias road names, just the training, you know, we all now know where for us Ralph's Ruts may be, because inevitably our citizens are still going to use those names to identify maybe where an incident has occurred at or some situation that we need to address.
Sure. Sure. No, very interesting. What's your biggest call type, do you think, in the rural areas of Kansas?
Um, Biggest call types. Well, I would say if we want to talk about the fire service, most generally those are going to be some type of agricultural burn, primarily maybe a pasture that's gotten out of hand or a grass fire with it. Um, Based off of our population base, I'm going to say in the medical world, a lot of falls. And a lot of that just has to do with demographics, of the population here, is that we have a high volume of fall calls. Um, and then I would say in our law enforcement, it's going to be thefts. And usually I think those thefts are associated with some other type of crime, whether that be drug related or something of that nature to sustain their habits or whatnot. But um, I'm going to say that those are probably our three most common call types based by the discipline.
Do you get a lot of thefts of canes, which cause a lot of falls?
No, not yet.
Sorry,
Not
I had
yet.
to go there, Josh. I'm sorry.
I think it's been walkers instead of canes.
Great, great. Well, listen, man, thanks very much. I really appreciate you sitting down. You're the first person I've talked to from kind of middle America, and the more rural areas. And it's again, I grew up in a rural area, and it's kind of nice. It's nice to see that even that hometown America can still benefit from next generation 911 services. It's not just the big cities.
uh, I'm thankful that you reached out to us, and there's not a lot of EMPs in Kansas. I'm sure we'd like to see more come and join the fold, but it was it, and um, the journey was well worth the reward. Even though I thought that it may not have occurred, and you walk out of that exam, and I'm like, boy, I really don't think I did that well, and um,
That's a sign of a good test, because you walk out and you go, I knew this cold when I walked in, but I couldn't bet you $1 on how I made this exact exam here, if I even passed.
yeah. So, but like I said, the process was well worth the journey. So, and for me, it's just a journey that's beginning, within the profession, and see where it goes from here and what else it leads to.
Good deal. Well, what did you do for studies? Did you do the study groups, by the way?
So, yeah, I did a couple. I actually signed up for one study group and attended it as I could live, depending on the schedule. With what was going here, we had some staff shortages, and I had to train some people, so I would miss some study sessions live, and I have to go and watch the recorded. Um, but what I found was beneficial as well is, I'll just say this: I sat in live through MCPs, through Mission Critical Partners with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then also, what I thought was great is I went back and watched some of Tracy's study groups that were recorded, and maybe just how it was stated in a little bit different way made it click.
Right.
So I see a great benefit in going through the EMP course process or study guides through different study groups, because
Right.
like I said, one may clarify it better than the other, and I found that very helpful to be in multiple study groups or go back and watch study groups that had already been recorded.
What I love about Tracy's, and don't ever tell anybody I ever said that I love Tracy's stuff, because no, I'm just kidding. Tracy and I are good friends. But what I love about Tracy's is she takes these obscure references to something not even public safety related and says, this is how this works in the public safety world. And a lot of people that just makes it click for them. And, I just keep hearing that over and over and over again. We're really fortunate that we've got the Colorado resources, the MCP resources, the group down in Florida, and Tracy's groups. And the good thing is they're all free, and you can all do as many as you want or as few as you want. And more people that I'm talking to are saying, well, I took a little bit of this, I took a little bit of that, and I kind of mixed it up across the board and revalidated, what I was learning. And that's what got me through.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what it takes to get you through, as long as you got through and you got the pass.
I would agree with that. So,
well, good. So now you can teach your own agencies and start to get those numbers for Kansas up a little more.
Yeah, we could definitely work on that and see what happens in the future. So,
did your agency pay for your ENP, by the way, or did you have to out of pocket that?
No, our agency covered it for it. So that's something that I'm very, very fortunate to have, is a very supportive board of county commissioners and the good budget line item and training, to cover that exam for me. So,
well, now you've set a good example for it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So
now you can get somebody to sponsor a scholarship once a year.
There you go.
8 years, you'll have your whole staff done.
Well, I would like to do that, but I think some of those, if they would look at it and say, this is not my strong suit. So with that as well, but we can always see what goes from there, and see what happens, and see if we can get more here at this agency to be ENPs. And I think it'd be a great start just to have more EMPs throughout the state of Kansas. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Good deal. Well, listen, Josh, thank you very much for sitting down with us today. Really been enjoyable. Director Josh Michaelis from the Rice County Emergency Communications Center, right smack dab in the middle of the country, right where all the satellites are pointed. So
there you go.
Thanks for sitting down with us today, brother.
Alrighty. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good one. Thanks.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that wraps up this episode of Off the Cuff, Confessions of an ENP. I'm Mark Fletcher, ENP, and I'm the Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. Off the Cuff is sponsored by 911 Inform, delivering next-generation 911 solutions to the enterprise today and making every second count. Visit them on the web at 911inform.com. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Fletch911. Check out all my blogs and podcasts at Fletch.tv. And be sure to like and subscribe below. That way you'll be immediately notified whenever a new podcast is published. Thanks so much for listening. If you're in public safety, thanks for what you do. Take care and have a great day.